Welcome to Is Anybody Listening to Me podcast with Azar and the Meat. Uh, this is a pretty fun episode. We're diving deep into the WandaVision episode 6. We're hooked, if you couldn't tell, because we've been talking about it every week. And we're going to do a little bit of football talk. I'm not going to waste any time. Let me welcome my partner, Big Meat. How's it going?
Good, Azar. It's football season's over, so now we gotta really dig deep in our bag of tricks here on what the heck we're going to talk about. But we still can talk about football just because the season's over. We're into early on in the NFL offseason here, so it'd be nice to just talk about a little bit about some of the free agents coming up. But yeah, first things first, WandaVision. Every week there's an episode, so we gotta. And every week there's some big revealing thing that ends up on that show that we have to discuss.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying about the football, it's interesting. I don't know about you, but because we don't have Tom Brady and the guarantee, like it seemed like every offseason the Patriots need to build on this or that, but it was always stable. Like the quarterback situation has always been stable. And this year there's so much need for the Patriots to rebuild the team. It seems like this offseason is more exciting. And it seems like there's a lot of things going on that most NFL seasons, when they end, you don't see a lot of movement right away. And it feels like there's a lot of potential pieces moving around this offseason, a lot of big names. So I think we're going to have a lot to talk about. And it's not even the draft yet. So I think there's still a lot to talk about. I think before we know it, it's going to be fantasy football time, and we'll be like going knee deep into it. So.
Yeah, and that's
I'm not worried about it. I think there's plenty of content. I just think there's just so much going on right now.
Yeah, and the NFL likes it that way. They like to go all year round, because every month there's something big, right? I think they said the 23rd of this month is the deadline to franchise players. So it'd be interesting to see like what teams franchise players. I know a lot of players don't like that sometimes. So then that's when they lead up afterwards and say, well, I want to hold out because I don't want to be franchised. I want the long-term deal. I don't want to play year by year. Then, of course, the NFL draft ends up coming. So you're right. I mean, there's all these players getting released and traded and whatnot. So there's always, every week, I'm sure there's going to be at least a little bit of discussion on NFL.
Yeah, I think it's worth listening to the podcast because we're going to provide that service. We're going to keep you in the loop all year. Where I think a lot of bad habits is, once fantasy season ends and the Super Bowl is over, you kind of forget about football. You kind of listen to it on talk radio, but you don't really focus on it. And then you start scrambling in August, maybe end of July or mid-July. You're like start scrambling, looking and starting to pay attention where the coaches changes and offensive changes. And you know what? If you're listening to our podcast, you're going to get updates weekly. So this isn't going to be like a crash course time fantasy drafts roll around. You're going to be everything's going to be kind of like old news to you by the time you start reading your magazine. And yes, Jarvis, I did say it, reading your magazine. I don't care what you say. You're just cheap. You won't buy Disney Plus, and you were being cheap with magazines. The magazine is the fun part over the summer, sitting on the beach and opening up a magazine.
That is very true. I've tried to do that with my phone, and it's just not the same. You can't.
It isn't.
It's hard to look at the screen with the sun shining down. You need a magazine. That is true. And even though it gets outdated, once you pick one up in whatever July, early August, it does get dated. A lot of things change, but hey, it's still at least kind of gets you into reading up a little bit early on with football. So I agree. I think getting a magazine is key. I don't know if it really helps you in your fantasy season, but at least it's enjoyable to read leading up to the season.
I know it doesn't make sense to buy it because it's like it can be a waste of money because you're right, it's dated. But again, when you've got nothing going on in the summer, you just want to relax. You want the kids to play in the water. You just want to open up the magazine and just sit in your beach chair and fall asleep with it on your chest or over your face. Who cares? Yeah. So it's covered with sunscreen by the time this draft starts. It doesn't matter. Like it's just part of the experience. Unless you're cheap. What are you going to go there? You're going to go to the beach with a red binder with all your notes printed or something? Who does that?
Well, we might know a couple of people that might just have the fantasy football magazine as just as a front. And we all know what's inside that magazine that people are reading. Just a way to hide it a little bit better.
That is true. I never even thought about that, but that is something to consider with these guys. All right. No alcohol, nothing exciting. to talk about from my end. I don't think you didn't have anything to review
Oh,
from alcohol. Hey, just stick to drinking beer or whiskey. So
drinking the same old beer and whiskey.
yep.
There's just
Uh,
nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong
no,
with that. Just nothing new.
no, not at all. So let's dive into
This is what
WandaVision.
happens, right? When we're going the weekly podcast, we've been doing good this year. Every week we're dropping a new podcast. So
That is true.
back when we were doing it every couple of weeks, every few weeks or whatever, there was some time to go out and buy a new bottle, try out a new beer. Doing it every week, that's tough.
Well, it's also a
That's
budget
tough.
buster. I can't buy a new bottle of whiskey. I
Sure.
don't have enough room to keep it. My son was asking my wife. He's like, "Why do we have so many different whiskeys?" And my wife's response is, "It's for the podcast." He keeps buying whiskey to try different ones for the podcast. So I can't deny it. It's true. It's a taste
Until we
testing.
become alcoholics, and then then we're in denial. It's for the podcast. It's for the
Yeah.
podcast. We're drunk 24/7. It's for the podcast.
Yeah, but you know what? It's for good intentions. Let's just put it that. It's a public service. That's what we're doing.
Agreed.
All right, let's dive into WandaVision. Every week they're revealing more and more, and it's getting more exciting, and it's leaving you hanging, wanting more. So they did a good job. I thought the beginning was kind of slow. I think they dragged it on a little bit, but now that the momentum is there, I think the show has been great. It's got me hooked. I'm hooked into it so much so that I've actually went back and stopped when it was on TV. I ended up watching Avengers Civil War, just because I was interested by the dynamic between. I'm more focused now on Vision and Wanda's relationship in the movies, and I was so captivated by that. I went back and watched Age of Ultron. So the show has got me, I think, accomplishing what Disney wants. It wants you to keep investing in watching their franchise, and it's got me hooked. So I've been doing that, and I picked up some nuggets that I just never really noticed because I didn't really care about that relationship before. And now that when you go back and watch, there are some things that are said that are relevant to the conversation. So, anyways, that's my take on it so far. I don't know if you had something.
Yeah, I did notice with this series compared to The Mandalorian, and maybe this is just the way Disney Plus wants to go about it with all their shows. I feel like every episode, some major thing happens, or there's some big reveal, or they bring back like this old character that you never thought was going to appear. Mandalorian was very much like that when they introduced some of the from the animated series, those characters. Every episode there was some big character that came back. And I'm starting to see that with WandaVision as well. And I hope it continues on with the next 3 episodes. I hope every episode from here on out, some big event happens, some big new character gets revealed that you didn't expect. We talked about Doctor Strange even popping up maybe later in the season. And then with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I hope they continue with that. I hope it's not just one of those shows where you just watch and nothing really is happening until the very last episode. Doesn't have to have all action or whatever, just something that to make you, just to get you looking forward to the next episode, whether it's a cliffhanger or something. And I think so far they've done a good job. I know Disney Plus hasn't had a lot of content since they've introduced it, but between WandaVision and the Mandalorian seasons, I felt that was the case with both those shows. So they're doing good, and I am looking forward to these last 3 episodes. In fact, I said to you last week, or maybe it was the week before, about the trailer. And I know you don't watch the trailers. I watch the trailer just because it I kind of want to see.
You can't wait.
I can't wait. And it's also, I don't want to, I try not to judge a book by its cover. So I look at the trailer and I said, all right, it looks good, but let me not watch the shows. Almost every scene that I've seen from the trailer has already been shown in the series. So it's like they've kept a lot of the clips from the last 3 episodes in their back pocket, So if you watch the trailer, I think there's only like maybe 1 or 2 scenes from the trailer that we haven't yet seen, and everything else has already happened. So now
awesome.
I'm completely in the clear. Like I'm completely have no idea what's going to end up happening.
Going in fresh. All right.
Yeah.
I love it. Now, I heard this, and I have been trying to confirm it. I don't know if you've seen it. I heard, because it was on one of the talk radio shows, on one of the sports radio shows, one of the guys that does a dork podcast, he was talking to another host, and they were saying that, it was a different show. I'm sorry, it was one of the weekend shows. I apologize. But it was on sports radio, and they were talking about WandaVision, and I got excited because I could relate for the excitement of WandaVision. I mean, they both were talking about how much they loved the show, and they were saying that they read from Marvel that the last 3 episodes are going to be an hour each. Did you read that anywhere? I've not come across that.
No,
And
I
I've been
did
trying to
not.
Google it, but they said there was a press release from Marvel that they were going to be an hour. And I hope so. I hope they're full hour episodes. That would be awesome. I'm like so excited if they're full cliffhanger episodes. So
Yeah, they could really get into a little bit more of the story as opposed to just squeezing it all in under a half hour. Yeah, no, I haven't heard that, but that would be great.
now,
I'm sure you could look that up somewhere.
yeah, I like I said, I started Googling it, but then I was just focusing more on the episode itself. Now, you wanted to dive into that commercial. You were excited about the commercial. So why don't you
Yeah.
give your conspiracy theory on the commercial? Because now you've talked about it a couple times since we've been going back and forth on this.
So in case people weren't aware, through each of the episodes of WandaVision, they have that little commercial in the middle of the episode, and they're kind of they're cryptic, right? You don't even know exactly what the hell's going on, but if you really read more into it, it goes back to some horrible story or something that horribly happened to Wanda, right? So like the first episode, they related the toaster to the Stark bomb that went in and killed their parents in Sokovia. The second episode was about the Strucker watch because Strucker and Hydra doing all the experiments on them. And then if you remember the Lagos paper towels, right? So Lagos was in Nigeria. That was where the bomb blew up in the building in Civil War and killed all those people, and Wanda kind of blamed herself for it. So it was always some scene in her past. This last episode with the shark, we haven't really seen anything that might resemble that. So you almost have to kind of read between the lines. It's something that's happened that we haven't seen yet. And we've touched a little bit on how the devil is at play here, and it could end up being kind of the deal with the devil sort of thing. I think the shark plays the devil, right? And the kid on that island plays Wanda. And what was the name of the yogurt? They called it like Yo Magic or whatever.
Yo Magic yogurt.
Yeah. So if you think about it, he gives the kid Yo Magic yogurt, or hence magic, right? Because we've even said that she's gained all these magic powers, or she's more powerful than she was from the movies. And in exchange for what? So the kid ends up like kind of shriveling away into like a skeleton and ends up dying. Is it in exchange for her soul to give her the magic power, enough magic power to bring back Vision and create this whole little world that she's created? And what did she have to give up to him? Right? Was it her soul? That's the part that I'm not sure of, but I'm almost certain at some point in the next 3 episodes there's going to be a flashback to how that whole thing played out. She's going to come across like, who is it? Mephisto, right from the comics. He's the devil. I don't know if I'm even pronouncing the name right, but I think he's going to pop up at some point, and it's just going to be like that exchange with Wanda. That's what I think that commercial was all about.
Okay, so interesting, and I don't disagree with you because there's different theories, and I think that's the exciting part about this show is that if you actually geek out and actually go and research it, there's tons of opinions on what everything means. Like, it's got everybody obsessed trying to figure out what everything means in the show. And I find it funny is that everybody's trying to figure out who's the main villain. Everybody knows there's a villain that's pulling the strings on this. It's just who it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just hinted on one. Now, I read 2 different things with that commercial so far. The first is when the boy dissolves into a skeleton, it's a red-headed skeleton, which goes back to that, to the Soul Stone. I forget the name of the character that guards the Soul Stone.
Red Skull.
Yeah, but didn't he have a different name as the guardian of that area? I know he's the Red Skull, but I thought he had I thought there was a name that he was assigned because now he was the guardian of that Soul Stone or whatever. But anyways, if you watched Captain America, the first movie, the Red Skull was the main villain. So he turns into the Red Skull. And again, is there something, a play on that they were saying, because did she exchange something for her soul, or something had to be done? So just kind of to your point, was there a deal made, right? The other thing that I read was the shark. If you looked at the shark's colors, it actually matches Quicksilver's colors. So is he a reference? Is the shark a reference to her brother that all of a sudden appeared supposedly there to help her, right? Because she was calling for help. And is he part of the mischief? Because he's got the same color scheme as Quicksilver. And I guess there was quotes where the shark kept on referring to him as little dude. And that the words little dude was said by Quicksilver in the other episode, during the episode. So they're saying, is there any correlation between the two? So is that shark, is that commercial relevant? Because in that episode, there was a lot of focus on Quicksilver. And at the end, she ends up blasting him because he knows so much about what Wanda's doing. Yep. So he's aware of it. So going back to what you're saying, now there's a conspiracy theory. Is Mephisto disguising himself as Quicksilver?
That's what I read too.
And is he going to be the reveal? But there is another character that people are talking about that is a big Marvel villain that is tied into Doctor Strange more than Mephisto. So Mephisto is supposed to be this all-powerful villain that impacts the Marvel universe. And I think it's more likely him from the stuff that I read. But there is another one people are introducing. There's a character called Nightmare. And he's actually a big villain for Doctor Strange. And is he the main villain that somehow ties the movie and the show together? Because that is someone that now Doctor Strange has had some run-ins with Mephisto in the comic books, but Nightmare is the main villain that he deals with a lot with. And he's a mischievous villain that can impact your dreams. So he could do this alternate mind thing like Mephisto has the power. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and they did drop the word nightmare in that episode a couple of times.
Yes.
It's kind of like the little subtle hints that's kind of what they're leading to. Yeah, it all makes sense. It makes sense. Both of those theories could definitely be what's happening.
So I did find something about why they think it's Mephisto more than the Nightmare, because in the comics, Mephisto is the guy that actually gives Wanda her children in the comics. She makes a deal with him, and that's how she gets her 2 kids. And he actually ends up absorbing the 2 kids in the comics and creates more pain for Wanda. So is it possible there? And they had some quotes in that I read that tie it back to him. So remember when she was doing that, I don't know, that tea party with all the women in the first or second episode? They were all sitting around, and that I forget the name of the first woman. Is it Dottie? Dottie is the woman.
Dottie, the blonde-haired lady.
The blonde, and
that was kind of running the show there. Yeah,
exactly. And they're saying, is that a reference? She runs everything, and you have to get on her good graces because she runs everything. And Dottie makes a quote saying, "The devil is in the details." And then her friend goes and said, "Not the what's the woman that keeps popping in? The one that was in a trance in her car at the end of the last episode."
Agnes. Agnes. Yeah, she's like, yeah.
So Agnes is actually a witch in the comics. So she's tied somehow, like she could be the witch that's trapped in Westview. And Westview is actually a dimension that traps witches. That's something that I read, but that's a little sidebar.
Yeah. And she was dressed up as a witch in the last episode.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So Dottie says to her that the devil's in the details. And then Agnes says back to her, that's not the only place he is.
Right. As if he's in hell.
Yeah, so there's a reference. Yeah. And then they were saying this is a reach, but like when Vision eats that gum, the brand of gum that he actually chooses to eat is Big Red gum. So so he eats Big Red gum. And then there was one last thing that ties where they think it's Mephisto is the main villain. I don't want to be a spoiler to you guys, but these are some of the things that like the nuggets that are being out there. In the trailer for Loki, watch the Loki trailer for his new show. There's a scene. It looks like he's in a church in front of a stained glass window. If you look closely, it's not a picture of Jesus or anything. It's the devil sitting on a throne. It looks exactly like Mephisto in the background. And they're thinking, would this villain cross into the Loki movie cross into the Doctor Strange movie. So is
Mm.
he the next Thanos that can easily cross the different platforms? So
Yeah,
that's
that's
something.
interesting.
Yeah. So if you
So,
look, Chris, you have to watch it. The Loki. I didn't realize there was a Loki trailer out already. But
oh
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
go look
See,
for it.
so you do watch trailers.
I do watch it.
You did watch that one.
I don't watch it when the show's running. Like I don't go back like you're
Yeah.
doing. But I was excited, and I went back and I went and watched the Loki trailer, and there it was. Like
Mhm.
if you look at it, it's got the guy sitting on the throne. It's faint because it's in the background, but you can see the horns on the guy, like the series
Yeah,
of
yeah,
horns.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Mephisto. So
That is interesting. I mentioned. I don't think I mentioned it on the podcast, but I did say the guy that plays Vision did say in an interview that there's a character that appears in the series that he's been looking forward to working with for years, right? So you almost kind of relate it back to some character from the Avenger movies that he didn't have a scene with. I always thought maybe that would have been Doctor Strange, but maybe it's Loki's the actor that plays Loki. Maybe
and
it's
that
him.
goes. So that goes now. Thank you. Because remember, I was telling you, I think Loki's tied to this somehow because he is mischievous. He does illusions, and it would be interesting. Like he somehow made a deal with Mephisto himself, right? But when you look at the preview of Loki, which I caught, it focuses on how he escaped in Endgame. He got the stone and he went to that alternate dimension, right? That's how the whole
Yeah.
series kicks off. He escapes in Endgame with one of the stones. And when you watch Civil War, no, not Civil War, I'm sorry. Civil War. There's a scene where Vision is talking to Wanda about how the stone, the mind, is it called the Mind Stone for that one that they use? I forget what I wrote down.
The Mind Stone is the one in Vision's head.
Yeah, so the Mind Stone is the same stone that gave Wanda her powers and gave Vision his ability
Right.
to be alive. So
Yep.
that one stone is tied to them, and that one stone still exists with Loki. Like he has it in an alternate dimension. So,
No, that's the Tesseract, right? So that's
but the
that.
Tesseract was that blue stone, but the
Right.
Mind Stone was hidden inside of it.
No, no, no. That was the Space Stone. It's different.
No, it isn't.
No, no. The Mind Stone was in his scepter. Was the one was in Loki's scepter, and
Yeah,
then they
what?
took the Mind Stone out of the scepter and they put it into Vision's head. The Tesseract is the Space Stone. That's the one where Thanos crushed the cube, and then he took it and then put it on his glove. So yeah, that's a separate. That's a separate.
Are you
Yeah.
sure?
Yep. I'm almost positive that's the case. Yeah, because it's a different stone.
Because he
I know
makes
it's like
the
because
Space Stone.
the scepter, the one that he used with a scepter that he was kind of mind controlling everybody, that was the Mind Stone. That was the stone that goes into Vision's head.
So why do they say the Tesseract gave? So did they have the? So didn't they
They had
have
the scepter.
They had the scepter. Okay.
Hydra had the scepter that created the Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch.
And
Yeah,
tied to
that's what it
Vision.
was. And helped create Vision and helped create Ultron, and it was just
Oh, there goes my theory. I thought they
Yeah.
were tied in. I thought that stone survived.
Yep.
Okay.
But
so
still, I mean, but if you look at the Loki trailer, when he goes into another dimension, the guy, the kind of the plot of that story, from what I've read, is he's kind of broken the rules of time or something. Like it's something to do with like he's trying to escape the basically, for lack of a better term, the time police, right?
okay.
Because he's trying to change something and those people are trying to control Loki and not to screw up with the timelines and whatnot. So that's why I didn't think Loki had any connection to this WandaVision show. But who knows? Maybe by the end of the Loki show, maybe Loki does appear at the end of this season, and then when you watch the Loki show, it'll kind of reveal exactly how he ended up back in with Wanda and Vision and whatnot. So.
Okay. So
knows?
the Space Stone allows them to travel dimensions, from what I understand, right? They can travel from one part of the universe
Yes.
to another part.
Yes.
So Loki, if he has that ability, could go in and out of.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, he could. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it could end up being the case, and I think Marvel is going with the whole multiverse approach of different worlds, different timelines. I think this is how they're going to move forward with introducing X-Men and Fantastic Four and other characters that they couldn't introduce before. This is their way around it. This is their way to get through it, because they can't just all of a sudden just say, "Oh yeah, there've been mutants living, forever," and you never see them. You never like saw them in any of the movies because they weren't allowed to introduce them. How do they introduce them now? They got to bring them in from a different dimension, a different timeline, and say, okay, they were here all along, but they just weren't in this world. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That's interesting. So I was hearing that people are hoping like a villain like Doctor Doom gets re-entered into this MCU
Mm-hmm.
a timeline of events like in the universe. So I watched the last Fantastic Four to see if there's, because I'm like, is Reed like, could they tie him in with this episode, kind of like what you were hinting at before? And I don't know, the movie was okay. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's
Oh, that
okay.
last Fantastic Four movie, yeah, that was
Yeah,
that
it
was
was
bad.
okay. But
Yeah, I didn't like it at all.
yeah, I got to find you the
It was
screenshot,
messy.
because when I was watching Civil War, and I told you I was all excited because it really looked like that kid Reed and Victor was the one that Brody was having drinks with when they were having that celebration party at the Avengers before Ultron came to life. There was that one
Yeah.
scene. You got to go, if you could fast forward, see if you can see. It's this dorky guy in glasses, and it has this guy that looks like Russian,
Yeah,
whatever Victor is.
I doubt it.
It might be a strange coincidence.
I doubt
but,
it. Yeah.
But,
I don't know if they would really get into that like that way back then, because that movie came out 2015, and the Marvel acquisition of Fox Studios didn't happen until 2019. So they couldn't. I mean, they could have. If you remember back in was it Civil War, when the when the heck was it? Was it at the end of Winter Soldier when they first introduced the twins, right? And when that guy Baron von Strucker was talking about them, he didn't refer to them as mutants. He referred to them as miracles, because they weren't allowed to use the mutant name in Marvel back then.
Okay.
So I think they were kind of hinting at it, and they say, okay, we'll say miracles, but then as soon as we get the rights to use the mutant name, then maybe we'll go back and say, yeah, what he meant to say was mutants. Like, so who knows? They can always go back to so many scenes from the past movies and kind of pull that stuff back in, but they didn't have any rights to any of the X-Men, mutants, Fantastic Four. They don't even have the rights to they didn't for Spider-Man for a while, until they didn't acquire Sony, but they made a partnership with Sony Pictures to use Spider-Man in the MCU. So Spider-Man is still, they could cancel that contract or just back out of that contract and just say, all right, that's it, and Spider-Man will no longer be part of the MCU. I don't know how they're going to explain that. Be able to just pull them right out of it, but that's the case. But now they can do whatever they want with X-Men and Fantastic, because they own Fox 20. They call it 21st Century Fox. It was 20th Century Fox forever, but
Yeah.
21st Century Fox, they own all their the rights to all their characters again.
No, that's interesting. So but Marvel Studios is its own entity, right?
Marvel Studios is its own, what they call it, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU.
No, I'm talking about, because when you look at when I was researching that Fantastic Four movie, it was said it was made by 20th Century Productions and Marvel Cinema or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's just it's a Marvel movie, so I don't know if they got royalties from it or whatever, but part of the contract that they have when they sold the rights to all those characters back in the early 90s basically was they're almost going bankrupt. Marvel almost went bankrupt back in the early 90s. They needed to make money, so Fox came up and they said, look, let us acquire all the rights to all the Marvel characters, not the Marvel characters, the X-Men characters, and you could still write your comic books, you could still, they're still your characters, but we have the movie rights to use them in our movies. You can't produce a movie from Marvel and call it your own using those characters. It's just
Interesting.
kind of
Okay.
like and then Marvel Studios came out in the mid '90s or late '90s. No, much later than that. In 2005, whenever Iron Man came out, and they made the first Iron Man movie, and that was a big hit. And then Marvel's like, shit, you know, we just made a big hit. We just launched our first Marvel Studios movie with Iron Man, and we don't even have the rights to a lot of our Marvel characters to put into movies. So that's why they couldn't introduce X-Men. They couldn't introduce all these characters. In fact, Incredible Hulk isn't even owned. They don't even have the rights to the Incredible Hulk. Universal Studios has the rights to Incredible Hulk, but they were allowed to use him in these movies as part of the Avengers, and he couldn't have his own standalone movie. It's
Yeah.
all like it's all lawyers get involved, right? And it's
Well,
a
it's
mess, and
it's
they're
a
not
win-win
allowed to
for
do what they want to
Universal.
do. Yeah,
Yeah, because they get to promote. They have the Hulk ride. They have the Marvel area at Universal Studios, so it's great for them to have this still going.
yeah. That's
Um,
why they're for a while there, because they were fighting with Fox to try to get the characters back, and what they ended up doing is they ended up sabotaging their comic book series on X-Men because they were kind of sticking it to them. It's like, all right, fine. Like, we're not going to create any new characters. We're going to end up killing all the characters off in our comic books so that those characters just go away. Go ahead, make a movie. No one's going to care about it in 5-10 years because those characters don't even exist anymore. So it's just kind of their way to stick it to them. But they got
yeah,
them back.
that's great. That's great. All right. So, uh, hold on. I'm sorry, Big. I'm busy. I don't know. Have Mom fix it. All right. Well, that's good. That's a lot of talk about WandaVision. I think we dived in. We went full dork into this thing. Sorry, I had to take a pause
Also,
because apparently when I podcast, my son doesn't care. He's going to come ask me to do something for him in the middle of a podcast. It's unbelievable.
you should invite him on. You should
Yeah. No,
start
no,
having
thank you.
have a conversation with him.
I don't need a
Not,
teenager on the podcast. All right, let's go. Let's move on to football. Because I know you had some point. Because once we watch episode 7, I'm sure there's going to be a lot. We're going to probably geek out some more and do some more research. But hopefully, we're getting close to see who the real villain is, and there's going to be a reveal soon enough. In WandaVision this week. So we'll stop there. But let's going on to football. You said you had some insight that you wanted to talk about the what's going on, and I think it's kind of cruel you're not doing it with the third man because he's the biggest fan of Tampa, and you're going to talk about Tampa Bay. I mean, we really needed his full blown pink hat support during this conversation.
if he's really that big of a fan, then he already knows all this stuff.
Okay,
He doesn't need me to explain it to him or teach him or
because there's a season ticket
educate him.
holder. He is a season ticket holder of Tampa Bay, so he is invested in this. So, and you know what?
That's true.
He gets knocked as for every like he gets picked on about being a pink hat and all that fun stuff. But I gotta say, it was smart, and if to go and get season tickets at like it was dirt cheap compared to Patriot season tickets. And he jumped on, went early, like a great investment. If COVID didn't hit, I bet you he could have sold those tickets for a ridiculous amount of money. By the end of the season, he would have been getting some great money, playoff tickets. He would have made some serious money and able to entertain himself. Now he's got tickets next year, which I'm sure they're going to be hot tickets and hard to get season tickets next year because there's probably a lot of energy and excitement right now. And I know Tampa Bay is not a big sports city, but I bet you there's excitement right now for it. And people are going to want to watch Brady now that he won the Super Bowl, watch that first game when they get the Super Bowl ceremony. I bet you he could sell those tickets and make some ridiculous cash.
Oh, sure.
For it. So,
absolutely.
You could knock him, but it was probably like the smartest business decision on his end.
You know what? If it was a case where we knew like COVID wasn't happening, I mean, anybody could get season tickets. It's not like there was a long waiting list, and it made sense. It made sense for him to get them. And now I don't remember. Were there fans in Tampa? Like, could he have gone to some games if he wanted to? Or I know the Super Bowl they allowed fans in there, but
I think they had some fans. I think it was limited, but I don't know if it was like. You remember how New England said they were going to do like a raffle-based system? Like it wasn't like you got every game and able to go. I think it was very restricted which game you're able to attend if you did decide to go. But
Yeah, I'm wondering if he get a full refund like we did with the
I think
Patriots
he, I,
tickets and a
I
credit
think he
towards
opted
next
for the
season, or
refund.
okay,
Yeah, I we'd
okay.
have to ask him to be sure, but I thought he went for the refund and just used the money for next season. I
Mm.
may be wrong. He could tell us next time he's on the podcast, but I think he might have done that. But
Yeah.
anyways, what's the big news, Big Meat? Let's give us the download of what's going on in Tampa.
So now that the season's over, right? We're into the off season here. I want to try to get into because the some of the big free agents, and we're not going to go through all the free agents or anything like that. I just want to specifically focus on Tampa in itself because they came off of a Super Bowl win, and you look at their team, and now everybody says the same thing about every team when they win the Super Bowl. Can they repeat? Are they going to come back next year? Are they going to do it again? Um, we all know Tom Brady's going to be there. There's a couple of guys that we know are going to be there, but there's a lot of free agents that are unrestricted for Tampa Bay. These are key players, guys like the linebacker Shaquille Barrett, wide receiver Antonio Brown, the other linebacker Levante David, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski. I mean, these are big names on that team. And Ndamukong Suh, he's an unrestricted free agent. So how are they going to bring all these guys back to try to make another run? Because now these guys are going to ask for a lot more money. They just won the Super Bowl, and they're going to demand for a lot more money. I think what's going to end up happening, and a lot of guys have already talked about restructuring their contract. Mike Evans has come out and said that. A few other guys. I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Brady ended up doing it as well and restructured his contract a little bit. He's done it before for the Patriots to try to bring a lot of these guys back. I think the guys that they are going to try to bring back are more on the defensive side, because if they lose Antonio Brown, okay, they lose Antonio Brown. They'll still have Mike Evans. I think they're going to try to bring Rob Gronkowski back. I think he's going to
Did you
probably.
mention Godwin? Godwin's a free agent.
I did mention Godwin. Yeah, I think
Okay.
he's the one guy that's going to leave because he didn't get paid a lot this year. He was getting paid dirt cheap money. He's going to look for the big contract. I don't think they're going to sign him. But what I think they're going to end up trying to do is, and we've kind of hinted at this all season long, and people have been talking about it. Even though Edelman is still signed with the Patriots, I think they're going to work out some kind of deal where Edelman ends up going to Tampa, and he's going to replace Godwin as their slot receiver. That's what I think, because I don't think they're going to sign Godwin. I think he's going to sign in somewhere else. I think they're going to restructure a bunch of contracts, and they're going to still try to bring back a lot of their big defensive guys to try to keep that team as together as they were this year. They have about 30 million or close to 30 million, I think 27 or 28 million to be exact, on left in cap space. So they don't have a lot to play with compared to like the Patriots, who have almost $70 million in cap space. But Tampa Bay does have a little bit of money to play with. I think that's what they're going to end up trying to do. I don't see Godwin resigning, and I see Edelman, leaving the Patriots and going to Tampa Bay. How that ends up happening, I'm not sure, because Edelman signed for another year. And
he might get cut. He might get cut.
But if he does get cut, I read this. He's going to be a dead cap hit of a little over $7 million, $7.16 million. I mean, that's a lot of money to just cut Edelman just to save a little bit of money and still get hit with $7 million. I think they're going to try to trade him in some way.
Yeah, maybe they'll trade him. I just don't see any upside of keeping him because he is injured. Like, he does get hurt a lot, and he's not as productive as he was. And I think if you're going to rebuild the offense, you're not building it around Edelman. I think you can lose a piece like Edelman. I think Belichick is someone that would move away and move on. Yeah. Like, if he's not going to be here, he's injured. And kind of going to your point, I don't think Antonio Brown or Gronk during the regular season when they played showed you that they really command a lot of money. And I don't think Gronk's going to leave Brady just to make more money. I think Gronk has plenty of money. Antonio Brown can try, but he's got a bad reputation. He's lucky to be playing with anybody. Mm-hmm. I think if it wasn't for Brady, I think he knows, like, where would I go? Like, no one's going to want me. So he's lucky to be where he is. So I'm not worried about them, and I don't think they're going to command big money. And if they do, I think they'll just say, go, you know what? It's not like you're not replaceable. Gronk, I think, is more valuable than Antonio Brown. And it's just because of that connection that he
Yeah.
has with Tom. The one guy
Yeah.
that I see leaving is the ever journeyman is Sue. Ndamukong Suh will go where the money is. He'll command big dollars,
True.
and I think
Yeah.
he won't care. He's not loyal to anybody. He's got his ring now, so I can see him saying, "Screw that! I'll go play and make how many more millions because I only have." He's at the end of his career, so if he doesn't get paid now, he's winding down. I just don't see him staying. So that's gonna be one of the defensive. I think they're gonna focus their money on the backers and try to replace Ndamukong Suh instead of spending all that money on him. I just don't see it.
Yeah. They did have a lot of good defensive players. It was surprising to see how many good defensive players they had by the time the season was over. But Sue is 34 years old and he's making $8 million, and he's going to demand double-digit money. You're right. I don't think Tampa's going to re-sign him. And like I said, he's 34 years old. He's going to be looking for that last big contract somewhere. So I think Sue is gone. I think Gronk is going to come back. I think they're going to try to re-sign Shaquille Barrett, who made almost $16 million last year. He wasn't like he was on the cheap, and he's still only 29 years old. And that's about market value for a guy like him. So they can re-sign him and still pay him the same money that they've always been paying him. And it's nothing much is going to change there. Whereas somebody like, I'm looking it up here, Chris Godwin, his salary last year was $821,000. He's going to demand big bucks. 25 years old. It's his first, big contract that he could sign somewhere. Someone's going to sign him for big money. I just don't see the Buccaneers re-signing him.
And I don't see. It's gonna be like the Jets. The Jets will sign him, pay him big money, and I don't even know what you're signing for. Like it's. I don't think he showed enough this year to overpay for Godwin. I don't see it. With Jameis Winston throwing him like 5,000 yards because of playing catch-up football, Godwin was great. But this season showed when they weren't playing from behind and you didn't really need him, he wasn't really part of you didn't really feel like he was a big part of the offense some games. He kind of just disappeared in some games. So I don't know what case he's going to make to say I deserve a multi-million and multi-year contract from anybody. He's going to be one of those guys that leaves the team and finds out, I'm not as good as I thought I was, and just be gone from the league a couple years after that. I just don't see it with him. And you know what? He'll probably end up on the Patriots with our luck. He'll be Godwin. So
I did hear Godwin was. I did kind of hear that he might end up with the Patriots.
I would love for them to go for someone like Allen Robinson from the Bears. Try to get him, who's not happy there, and try to find a young quarterback.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're done with the Buccaneers, but it was interesting. I did do some homework, not just to put some controversy from the Super Bowl. Is I actually went back and looked at Brad Johnson and that Super Bowl team and their performance versus Tom Brady. And do you know Brad Johnson in that year, he didn't have the passer rating as Tom Brady. So Tom Brady had a better game based on the passer rating score that they have. But Brad Johnson, he had 215 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. And I think, what did Brady finish with? Like 200, 215 maybe?
Super Bowl?
Yeah,
201.
201 and 3 touchdowns. So it wasn't.
But you can't. Yeah,
no, it's not apples to apples. I'm not saying that. But I was looking at the team around Brad Johnson, and do you know his number 1 receiver in the Super Bowl was Joe Jaravicious?
Yeah, I remember that.
And Keyshawn Johnson was his number 2.
Yeah.
And Michael Pittman was his stud running back with 124 yards rushing. So I was like, wow, he really didn't have a lot of talent, and he put up similar numbers. But what I found was interesting is in that game, the defense put up 5 sacks and 5 interceptions. And this year, the defense put up 3 sacks and 2 interceptions. So not as good. And then they scored in defensive touchdowns like they did during that Super Bowl year. Because in that year, they won 48-21. But it was interesting is how important the defense is for both Tampa Bay teams in 2003 and in 2021 played in the success of that Super Bowl. And
the difference is one played the Oakland Raiders and the other played the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, but back then the Oakland Raiders had Jerry Rice. They had Jerry Rice, and Gannon was just terrible.
He was old. They had a good offense. They did, but Tampa, their defense that year was just, they were nasty.
lights out.
Um,
But I just was like shocked when I saw the numbers
Well, you
because
can't compare Brad Johnson's statistical numbers with Tom
I
Brady, especially after we just said last week Tom Brady threw 9 pass attempts in the second half. He didn't even have to pass.
I know that. But Brad Johnson didn't have to either. The defense was in full control. They won 48-21. It wasn't like they were at risk of losing the game.
Yeah.
But I only brought that up because I was curious to try to figure out if the numbers weren't that different than Brad Johnson, other than like the passer rating number. He got the MVP for the Super Bowl. And the defense, I think the defensive player, if I was not wrong, Jarvis said Derek Brooks got it
Yeah.
for got the MVP for the Super Bowl, and I think it's because he had an interception for a touchdown that got it. But
Right.
I was wondering, geez, I know they gave it to Brady, but I was wondering, geez, like how different was this defense? I was trying to do like some like just dig again, like was the defense that different than the
You're
one that
reaching.
won it?
That's what you were doing. You're reaching for something.
It was just.
But there wasn't one player on the defense that really stood out. As a whole, they did really well. But there wasn't one defensive player that you could say, wow, he had 3 sacks, or he had a interception return for a touchdown, or he did. It wasn't really anything big there. Like you could go back and say in the 2001 Super Bowl when Ty Law had the pick 6, they probably would have gave it a Ty Law that year or that Super Bowl. But because Tom Brady had that final drive to march him down the field and kick the game-winning field goal, they ended up giving it to Brady because of that one drive, right?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that one drive, I think they would have given it to somebody like Ty Law. I think a defensive player always kind of gets it if they go above and beyond something that they do that's a difference maker in the game. Otherwise, if the quarterback even has decent numbers, they're always going to give it to the quarterback. That's just
no, I know.
It's like almost by default that they give it to him.
I was just curious comparing the 2 years. How I was just shocked how similar Brady and Brad Johnson's numbers were to each other, and then and again it was like the defensive thing, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, and I was just curious. Well, they gave it to Brooks. I wonder if anybody stuck out in this Super Bowl that would have earned it. But you're right. No one. And even
it's a couple of guys that I think Sue might have had a sack and a half. I think in that game, somebody had a sack and a half. I think it was Sue. You're not going to give it a Dominican Sue. Like he just didn't do enough. Didn't do enough to warrant the MVP in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely had to give it to Brady. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there was to have 3 touchdowns in the first half, and he could have had a lot more in the game. I mean, he put him in that position to be up by so much that they could release the dogs, on the defensive line and go after Mahomes a little bit more. I bet you if it was a close game, they wouldn't have had that much. They wouldn't have had that many pressures, up the middle. They probably would have dropped some people back because they were afraid. They would have been afraid of Tyreek Hill. They would have been afraid of Kelsey. So
yeah, no, it's just interesting. It's funny because the offense for that Buccaneers team in 2003 was nowhere as good, and that's a stretch to say is nowhere as good. Like their main running back in 2003 was Michael Pittman, and this year was Leonard Fournette was their number 1 back. I feel like they just built. I mean, I think the receivers were better this year than Joe Jaravicis and Keyshawn Johnson were for 2003.
Jaravicis. That's a name. That's a blast from the past.
I couldn't believe it when I saw his name. I'm like, that was the number 1 receiver in a Super Bowl. Holy cow! Like that's just not right.
Yeah, different era too back then. That was before the run and gun. Like that's before a quarterback started throwing on a consistent yearly basis 30 plus touchdowns a year. People used to say about the Ravens of that 2000 year, that was another year I predicted the Ravens were going to win the Super Bowl before the playoffs, and everybody kind of were like, was almost laughing at me like, there's no way the Ravens are going to win. Their offense stinks. And I said, go back and look at the Ravens game log after they benched, was it Tony Banks? Tony Banks was the quarterback, and then they put in Trent Dilfer. They put in Trent Dilfer. If you look at their points per game, they were consistently in the mid-20s. Now today's NFL, mid-20s is like, yeah, whatever, you're in the middle of the pack. Back then, mid-20s, that's a good amount of points. Consistently scoring in the mid-20s, and I think one of the playoff games they ended up scoring like 40 something points. So it wasn't like their offense was non-existent. They were non-existent when Tony Banks was quarterbacking, where they were winning games 6-3. I think it was another game they won like 9-6, 3-0. It was just like they had like 4 shutouts in the first half of the year. It was pathetic. Their offense was miserable. But as soon as Dilfer came in, they picked it back up and they ended up scoring enough points. They didn't have to score 30 points because that defense was insane.
Yeah, it's so they had Jamal Lewis though as their running back, right? That was the Jamal Lewis.
He was a rookie that year. Yeah, that was his rookie year. Yeah,
1,300-yard rushing rookie.
Yeah,
he was a beast. He was a beast back then
until he went to jail.
Yeah. Did he go to jail?
Yeah, he went to jail. Yeah, I think for a couple of years, I think he went to jail, and then he tried to make a comeback in the NFL and played another year or two or whatever, and he just wasn't. He was never the same.
Wow. Yeah, they had Shannon Sharp on that team, that loudmouth. That's why I hated him. I hated that team. Shannon Sharp, Ray Lewis.
Ray Lewis. Yeah, I mean, I hated the players on that team, but that defense was, right up there with the Bears.
Yeah, their wide receiver was Quadri Ishmael.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And anyways, that was an all defense win. All right, let's start winding it down for the podcast. Let's start wrapping up. Let's get to the final thing I wanted to talk about. It's Patriot related in a sense. There's a lot of free agent quarterbacks that are out there right now. And I know there's a lot of rumors of people that can be traded, like Carson Wentz wants to get traded. I'm hearing Derek Carr's name being thrown around. We all know about Deshaun Watson. But there are some other free agent names that I just don't I don't know what your thoughts are. I think we talked about Mariota on the team, and I don't think you were a big fan of Mariota.
No.
What about like projects to build on? Like, is someone like Tyrod Taylor a bridge that would be better than Cam Newton? As long as no one pierces his lung before a game. What about Mitch Trubisky? His numbers aren't terrible, but they're a terrible team. Like, that was a terrible offense, terrible coaching. Would he be worth a rebuild with someone like with Josh McDaniels? Could Josh McDaniels rebuild Mitch Trubisky's career? I'm just throwing it out there. I
think all these journeyman quarterbacks, like I don't know. I mean, I know we mentioned this before with Tannehill. Right? Tannehill, who knew all those years in Miami, he was going to end up becoming a pretty good quarterback in Tennessee. But with Tannehill, you kind of saw a little bit there. There was some upside to him, even when he played for the Dolphins. I just don't see guys like Trubisky or Tyrod Taylor or any of those guys none of them excite me if they ended up with the Patriots. Now, there is one guy, I think you mentioned his name last week, that would actually excite me, and that's Teddy Bridgewater. He actually would be interesting because
if they trade him, if Carolina trades him.
Yeah, if they trade him. But there was some talk that they wanted to trade him. And he is a guy that I would say, okay, he might be all right, because everything I've read about him, that everybody loves him in the locker room. He's like the best teammate, great leader in the locker room. A little bit like Cam Newton, right? Everybody loves him too, and we saw how that worked out. But Bridgewater was the guy 2 years ago when Drew Brees got hurt, and then he was the backup to Drew Brees. He stepped in, and the Saints went 4-0 with Bridgewater. That's how Bridgewater was able to sign with Carolina, because they said, oh, like, he's proven that he could win. You go 4-0 with the Saints team. He was putting up decent numbers, and they signed him to Carolina. So I think he's got some solid potential that he could end up being a pretty good quarterback for the Patriots. But other than him, other than the obvious guys like Deshaun Watson, none of those guys, Ryan Fitzpatrick, none of those guys really excite me. None of those guys. I'd rather have them just go young. I'd rather have them go draft a quarterback, and at least then it's the unknown. It's like, he could be good. We don't know anything about him. Maybe you start him off from scratch as a young rookie and build him up from there. I just don't want to get one of these reclamation projects like Mitch Trubisky and throw him in there. It's like, that doesn't give me a lot of confidence.
Well, it depends on the draft. Like, if they can get someone young, I agree with you. If they can't, if they just can't find the value that they're looking for, and Belichick's all about value, if he doesn't find it, I have a feeling I wouldn't be shocked if they bring in, like, Andy Dalton's a free agent, and he showed with the Cowboys
Yeah.
that he can run an offense. He's still functional. He's a good bridge guy. Like he's a temporary bridge. He's at least he can throw the ball compared to Cam Newton. He is a pocket passer. He's more traditional what Josh McDaniel has worked with. I'm wondering if someone like, and it's not ideal. I'm not saying I'm excited about this. I'm just wondering. I don't want to see Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know there'll be some great games with Fitzmagic. He'll have a couple games, but he'll have some dogs.
Oh, sure.
We just need someone to come in and just function and just
be better than Cam Newton.
Just
what we want.
Because I think you touched on it last week, is that their offense, despite Cam Newton being as bad as he was, they still won 7 games. So there's nothing that I have a feeling that if Belichick had someone that he said, look, I see someone that has a brain, just play their offense, don't be stupid with the ball, just get the ball downfield, let my defense rest, I'll win it with my defense, just be functional.
Yeah, and one of those losses was with Brian Hoyer. Cam Newton didn't even play in one of those games, and maybe if he did, maybe they would have been 8-8. I know it was against Kansas City, but they actually kept that game pretty close.
Yeah,
up until the end.
I'm just hearing
they had a couple of close games at the end too, where they lost to Seattle, like at the goal line. Like they could have ended up being 9-7, 10-6, even with that team. That's that would have been an accomplishment. But yeah, if there's any of those free agents, that none of them really get me too excited. Would you be excited if they sign one of those guys and then going into next season, like, all right, Patriots are back? Would you feel that way?
No, I mean, obviously, if they got like Deshaun Watson or someone, yeah, you'd be excited if they grabbed it. But that just doesn't seem realistic. I'm trying to figure, like, what if they did trade for Carson Wentz? I'm not sure if I'm too excited about Wentz. I feel like he's in his head.
Yeah,
he's damaged.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I wonder if Derek Carr.
Well, he might be somebody. Like he would be better than Trubisky. I would like Wentz better than, only because Wentz came out of the league on fire before he ended up getting hurt, tearing his ACL. I mean, he was a pretty solid quarterback. I think that year he was the number 1 fantasy quarterback before he got hurt. And then since then he hasn't been the same, but at least the talent's there. At least there's something there that you could kind of work off of, but even him, I wouldn't be too excited over him, but I'd like him over some of those other guys you mentioned.
Now, what about Derek Carr? He's always seemed like he puts up numbers every year.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like, I know he doesn't get along with Gruden. There's like an issue with him and Gruden. But before Gruden, I thought Derek Carr was a functional
he's okay.
quarterback.
He's okay. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I like I said, I first of all, I don't think any of those guys are coming to the Patriots. I think Cam Newton's going to be the quarterback, whether we like it or not. I think he's coming back. It's going to happen. I'm telling you. Belichick wants to give him another chance. Maybe with a preseason. Maybe I don't know. I just don't see them going out and signing yet another. They might bring in another quarterback just to compete. But I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be Cam Newton as the starting quarterback again.
I'm not sure the hate.
Painful year.
I'm not sure I get the hate with Gruden on Derek Carr because, over the last 3 years, how long has Gruden been there? 3 years?
Was it 3 years or 2 years?
Is it 2 years?
2 or 3 years. Yeah.
It's because say it's been 3 years, right? I'm just going say it's 3 years, but maybe it's only been 2. He's been throwing over 4,000 yards a year. So it's not like he can't get the ball downfield. He starts almost every game. There's a couple years early on, 16 and 17, he missed one game. Game started, one game. He's like 2 years he played 15 games. He didn't play 16. But other than that, 15 games. So compared to Wentz, who can't stay healthy, compared to Mariota, who just seems broken, Fitzpatrick is just there's not a lot of upside left. You know what you get with Fitzmagic. Trubisky, I could see as a working project. He needs a complete rebuild. But I think if you want someone to plug in, why not Gannon? Like, I think the Raiders are dumb enough to make any stupid trade. They're a dumb organization. They'll trade anything. They'll do something stupid. And I think Belichick could take advantage of the Raiders management team and make a trade that benefits all Belichick. Like, a very one-sided trade for himself. And get someone like Gannon. Gannon. I'm thinking of the Super Bowl.
If they bring in Rich Gannon, then then all hope is lost.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that game. I was just thinking of the Super
Carr.
Bowl. Yeah,
Derek
but
Carr.
Derek Carr. Yeah, so if Derek Carr, I think he'd be a functional. I wouldn't be
Yeah,
too
he would
disappointed
be
with him.
okay. Yeah, I guess he would be okay. He's a little bit like Stafford. It just okay. The numbers are there, but is he a winner?
But you're not. But you're
Stafford
not
was
gonna.
never really a winner, and
But if you get him in and he does turn to be able to turn it around, he's still young, right? So how old is he? Like he could, in theory, he is.
got to be up in his 26, 27, something like that.
I'm not seeing his age. Oh, bummer. So he is 29. So he's
Oh,
young.
wow,
So say you bring him in, right?
older.
And he's 29, and you could bring him in for 3 to 4 years if he proves like he's a Tannehill. Like, cause he has one with the Raiders. He's closer to Tannehill
Mm-hmm.
in recent history compared to like Wentz, who hasn't done it in a
Sure.
couple of years. We're kind of living off Wentz's legacy off that 1 year. I
Yeah.
think if they're going to go for someone, I think as a season ticket holder, don't make me sit there and watch Cam Newton again unless you can guarantee me that a full off season and him working is the difference. If really that was the difference, unless you can guarantee me that we won't see the same
Yeah.
crap. But I'd rather see Derek Carr in a Patriots uniform if I could.
Yeah, Derek Carr wouldn't be too bad. In fact, the one thing I do like about Derek Carr is he says all the right things in the media. Like I like his attitude. Like he said something I remember last year that he feels disrespected around the league. He feels like that he plays hard. He's tough. He tries to do everything he can to be a leader on the team. I remember the training, the Hard Knocks, the training camp Hard Knocks when he was on it. Like I liked his approach to everything. So he has a great attitude towards it, and so that alone might end up, he might end up coming in and saying, "Look, I'm just going to listen to what the coaching staff tells me. It's the Patriots organization. It's worked for Brady. I'm going to put my ego aside, and I'm just going to, try to do what they tell me to do." And yeah, he might not be too bad, but I think with Cam Newton, if he ends up staying, what if they did bring in Godwin? What if they did bring in, a couple other weapons? Who's the tight end that's the big free agent tight end that's out right now? Like they bring in
Joku from Cleveland.
Yeah, so he's one of them. Yeah, like if they brought in somebody like that, and all of a sudden he's got a couple of weapons around him. Plus Damian Harris. Now they stop messing around with Sony Michel and the running back by committee approach. Just make Damian Harris the guy, and who knows? Maybe that could end up becoming, might have a pretty good offense behind it. But I just don't see. I don't see it because we've seen Cam Newton's accuracy. I don't care if you get the best receivers in the league on the same team. It's not going to improve his accuracy, So,
yeah, I just don't see how they bring him back. And there's someone. Actually, I think it's Keyshawn Johnson. Speaking of the devil, I think he's on the NFL Network. Is he not? Is he on one of the channels, right?
Yes.
And he, I guess, has a relationship with Cam Newton. And they were saying he's like an inside person that knows, because for some reason there's a connection to him in New England. And he had a quote, and I heard it on the radio, almost like crashed my car, that he's feeling more and more confident every day that Cam Newton's coming back. And I'm just hoping he's wrong. Like hoping like he's getting fed the wrong information. I just can't see them bringing him back. And I don't care if Cam Newton just announced today that he's going to stop spending $1 million on wearing his wardrobe once and throwing it away. Like he's going to focus on saving his money. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't you just focus on your football career, stupid, instead of worrying about your freaking outfit of the day?
Right.
But even through all the crap he was doing, and as much as he sucked, he still was more focused on how he appeared. Right? He never said anything bad. I know he's like a good locker room guy. But I feel like he's not a Belichick guy mentally. Like, is he really focused on the sport or more?
Yeah. Well, we always said that about him before, and then he did everything right, and Belichick loves him. He's always come out and said, but I don't know. That could also be his way of sticking it to Brady a little bit. When Belichick comes out and says, "Yeah, he's the hardest worker guy out on the field. I've never seen a quarterback work so hard." And he's such a great leader, and he's probably just sticking it to Brady as he's saying this. But
I believe it. Yeah.
who knows?
Belichick's a jerk that way, and it's just frustrating. And I think didn't Keyshawn Johnson do a tour in New England briefly?
Who?
Did Keyshawn Johnson make a brief tour
I
in
don't
New
think
England?
so.
No, I know
Oh,
Chad. No, Chad Johnson was the guy he was obsessed with, right? The Ocho Cinco was there
yeah.
was like this weird vibe
Yeah,
between him and Belichick,
yes,
like,
yes, yes,
and it
yes.
just didn't make any sense. That's what I'm thinking of, not
And
Keyshawn Johnson.
he's the guy
It
that
was
they
Ocho
brought
Cinco.
in. Yeah, yeah, because they loved each other, and then he brought him in, and it's like, this guy's an idiot.
Yeah,
Guy doesn't even guy can't read a playbook. It's like,
yeah,
what are we doing with this guy?
yeah.
But,
No, I know. All right, well, let's
well,
leave it on that note. So we'll just wrap
well,
it up there.
there's one guy that they're definitely not going to be bringing in morbid to turn this into a morbid podcast, and that's Vincent Jackson. They're not bringing in
Oh,
Vincent. They're not bringing in Vincent Jackson. Too
all right.
soon.
Yeah,
Too
that's a
soon, Azar.
little too soon. All right. On that note, folks, we're before the lightning bolt hits and short circuits our computers.
Come on, that was a layup. I had to. We were talking about receivers. I had to bring him up. Hey,
I'm
you know
gonna.
what? I was a big fan of Vincent Jackson. You know, he was one of my guys in fantasy early on in his career. I loved Vincent Jackson.
Oh, he was
So
good.
that's
He's good.
a
Well,
shame.
I'm gonna
34
rename our
years old.
podcast Azar and Mephisto. That's the new podcast. All right. All
There
right.
is one. My last just my last comment here before we close up the podcast here. I know we talk a lot about shows, and you know we have like the streaming services and whatever. And I'm not into network television anymore, but there is a show I'm interested in, and it's actually on right now, or actually was on earlier when we first started the podcast, and that's Young Rock on
Oh,
is it NBC? So I have it recorded. After we finish this podcast, I'm actually going to watch that episode of Young Rock because I do like the character. I do like The Rock himself, but from looking at watching the commercial, there's a guy that plays the character that plays Andre the Giant in it. There's another guy that plays Macho Man Randy Savage, and just those two actors playing those guys caught my attention. I said,
all right.
now with The Rock included, I don't watch any network television anymore, but that's definitely a show I think I'm going to start watching.
That's fair. All right. And you know what? And we'll
Yeah.
have to bring the third man in because we all know he has a chubby for The
He's
Rock.
a very yes.
Yeah.
He loves The Rock.
Yes.
That's for sure.
All right. That sounds like a plan. All right,
Well,
folks.
that's so we know what we're going to be talking about next week.
Yeah, we'll put that on the schedule. All right. I can't wait for the download. All
There
right.
you go.
Well, download us off of Apple iTunes as usual, SoundCloud, or YouTube, wherever you find us. And we'll catch you next week. Take care, Big
Yeah.
Meat.